Hello, I'm Neil Whelan, and welcome to the Wesleyan Podcast. In this episode, brought to you by Wesleyan Financial Services Retirement Club, Marie Williams-Cooke talks to Regional Manager Simon Cosgrove about how dental practice owners can start planning their exit strategy as they approach retirement. Before we get into that, though, I need to remind you this podcast is for information only and doesn't constitute financial advice. But if you do feel as if you need to talk to someone about your finances and retirement planning, I'll be back later to tell you how to get in touch with us. But for now, I'll hand you over to Simon. And first up, Marie.
Today we're speaking to you, Simon Cosgrove, Regional Manager, about the importance of planning for your exit strategy as a practice owner. Simon, let's start by discussing the two main components of an exit strategy, the commercial and the personal. And why is it important to address both sides when planning to exit your dental practice?
Commercial and personal, it's because they're all part of one big picture. And I think there's a number of dentists who I've seen over the years who were just focusing too much on one side or the other. They were focusing too much on the sale of the practice and not really planning for what happened afterwards. And too many people were on the other side of things, focused too much on the personal side of things. So what retirement looked like and what they were going to do and fund it, rather than thinking about the sale of the practice. So both are equally as important. On the commercial side of things, it's making sure that you've got the right agreements in place for a start. So making sure that the clauses within your partnership agreement, for example, is correct. Making sure that the business, the practice, is as profitable and as organized as it can be, and that you know how the next few years before you sell, how that's going to pan out, and whether your plan is to sell to a business partner or one of the associates, or if you're just going to sell the practice as a whole to a corporate or just on the open market. So there's a lot of things to think about on the commercial side of things. On the personal side of things, part of it is thinking about what retirement looks like. And it's going to be different for everybody. So it's always important to feel like you've got a purpose, and that's the same in retirement, that something is going on. So whether it's holidays or whether it's a new hobby or the family or whatever it is, it's also important to remember that the standard of living that you've got is going to be what you're stuck with, if that's the right phrase, for the rest of your life, because you haven't got this income, this regular earned income coming in anymore. You're going to be reliant on what you've built up. And a lot of it might be the sale proceeds of the practice, but there's also going to be other things. There's going to be things like personal pensions that you've got, the NHS pension, if you're ever a member of the NHS, ISAs, savings, inheritances maybe in the future. So it's just making sure that you're accessing whatever you've got, including the sales proceeds, at the right time, because it might not be at the right time initially at the beginning of retirement for all of it. It might be different parts of your capital at different time, and the right way into which to access them over the years in the most tax efficient way. So there's a lot to think about, and there's a lot to plan for on both sides of it, whether it's commercial or personal.
Okay, you mentioned that the commercial aspect of an exit strategy includes making sure the business agreements are in place. Can you just walk us through what those agreements should contain?
Yeah. I think the first thing to say that if you don't have, this could be something like a partnership agreement. So if you're in a partnership, for example, there should be a partnership agreement in place, not just because you're planning to sell, but it should have been there throughout the whole of your ownership of the practice. Because if you don't have the right agreement in place, it can negatively impact the value of the practice, but it could also impact you and any business partner negatively on the personal side of things. So when you're thinking about business agreements, think about things like if you have got one, or even if you haven't, I suppose, what's going to happen to the business and the value of the business if either you or your business partner is off for a significant period with illness, or if one of you die? What would be the impact to the value of the practice then? Who covers the share of the expenses in the event of one of you dying or being ill? What happens to their share of the profits? So obviously you've both, if there's a partnership, then there's this value that you each have in the practice. Do you have sufficient to pay their family what they are owed? Because that's part of their assets, that's part of their estate. What does your business agreement say about that? Do you have any insurance policy? A lot of dentists use insurance policies just to say, well, in the event of my death, let's say the practice is worth £1 million, then we will insure each other for 500,000, so that in the event that one of us were to die, insurance policy would pay out 500,000 for us to then pass on to your family. They've got their money, their fair share of your estate from the practice, and then the practice can then just continue without any financial implications. Other than that, obviously, partnerships can break down. So if one partner or the other were to exit the business prematurely, what are the financial circumstances around that? What's the clause around retirement? Is there some sort of agreement within there to say what happens in terms of notice period or anything else? So business agreements cover lots of things around the sale of a practice, but also around the ongoing relationship and what happens in the event that something terrible happens. So it's important that everyone understands exactly what agreements they have in place and what they do or don't make provision for, because that will help protect the value of the practice and also to help you understand what that value is. They can, if you get it wrong or if you don't have an agreement, it can impact your exit strategy plans and then potentially your retirement and your family, and then what you're passing on to your family in the event of your death.
Okay, so how far in advance would you suggest preparing for an exit strategy? And can you just talk us through those steps?
Yeah, I've seen dentists start to plan sort of 20 years in advance. I'm not saying that's too early. It's a good idea to start thinking about it, probably that early. 10 years before retirement is probably when you'd start to nail down a bit more of the detail in terms of, yeah, I think I'm going to go in approximately 10 years time. Start to put a bit more detail around it in terms of what you would want to do in retirement, how you would fund it, whether there's anyone within the practice that you could or would be interested in buying it, whether you'd want to sell to a corporate, whether you'd want to sell on the open market. And then 5 years before is really the time when you need to get everything lined up and ready. So over those 10 years, let's say, and into the last 5 years, have a think about any shortfalls that you've got in your retirement. And this is where something like cash flow modeling can come in, which is something that a financial advisor should be able to help you with, where we can have a look at your income and expenditure both before you sell a practice and then afterwards, so we can make use of the various sources of capital that you've got to create the level of income that you want for the standard of living that you want in retirement. So if someone says to me, I would like an income of £5,000 a month, for example, in retirement, we can have a look at how much things like the NHS pension would provide, and then have a look at other pension and savings and what's going to come from the sale proceeds of the practice and then work out what the most tax efficient way of providing that level of income would be. So that's not an overnight kind of job. That's something that needs to be assessed 10 years before retirement to give you time, if there is a shortfall, to make up that shortfall by additional pension contributions, for example, or increasing the value of the practice. So it's just making sure that everything is in line within the practice and also personally. Making sure that the practice is as profitable as possible during those last 10 years makes it a lot easier to sell, because generally speaking, the more profitable a practice is, the more attractive it is for someone to buy. There is a market in terms of the goodwill value of practices, and there was every year NASDAQ do a quarterly goodwill survey, and one that covers the quarter that ended July in 2024 said that the goodwill value of practices was at the lowest level since 2018. So there are fluctuations in terms of when the best time and the worst time to sell. And sometimes it's like buying and selling a house. You don't really know when the right time is until it's gone. But it's something that might accelerate or decelerate your plans if you think, I think the market is quite low at the moment. If I hang on for another year or so, I might get a little bit more. But that's something that you would have to take professional advice on. But it's a consideration, because it's going to affect the price that you can market the practice for. When a practice is sold, it's based on something called EBITDA, which is an acronym for earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. All it is it's an indicator of the overall profitability of a business. And generally, the sale value of a practice is based on a multiple of that figure, of the EBITDA. So just having an understanding, an overview of your practice, having a look at where things could be improved, increasing income, lowering outgoings, that's going to help to maximize the value of the practice. But that's where an accountant can help you, whereas a financial planner, a financial advisor can help you with cash flow analysis before and after retirement.
Lastly, for dentists wanting a smooth transition, what are the 3 key things you wish every dental practice owner knew about planning for their exit?
I think 3 key things, and they're probably common sense more than anything else. Firstly, it's never too early to start planning. So don't suddenly decide when you're 58 and you want to retire at 60 or sell a practice by 60 that you're going to do it then. So it's never too early. Have a think about it, planning, preparation, making sure everything is as good as it possibly can be, and that you know that after retirement, the standard of living that you want is achievable. Second thing is the whole process is probably going to take longer than you think. So just plan ahead and speak to professionals in terms of accountants and solicitors and financial advisors, just to get an idea of what a realistic timescale is for selling a practice, marketing a practice, and just making sure that all the capital that you need is accessible when you need it. And the final thing I would say is, don't just think of the sale as the end, because there's quite a lot of life after that. There's quite a lot of retirement. And for some people, you might be retired for as long as you were working. So just have a think about the standard of living that you want in retirement. You've worked how many years for to save sufficient to be able to do it. So just make sure that it's the standard of living that you want and it's sustainable, and then think about what the most efficient way of funding it is from a tax efficiency point of view, but also a legacy point of view for the family as well.
That's really useful. Thank you. And thank you once again for joining us.
And that's our show for this week. Thank you to Marie and Simon. If you are looking for expert financial advice, go to wesleyan.co.uk, where you can book an appointment with one of our specialist financial advisors. Charges may apply, but we won't charge you until you've agreed the services you require and the associated costs. Find out more at wesleyan.co.uk/charges. While you're on the website, you'll also find links to Wesleyan's Retirement Club and all its resources to help you plan for the years ahead once you finish working. As for finding out about Wesleyan more generally, we're on the website formerly known as Twitter, as well as on Facebook, Instagram and LinkedIn. And if you found this podcast useful, you can like and subscribe to us on all the usual platforms, as well as find us over on YouTube, where there's a whole library of videos covering a wide range of financial planning topics. But that's it for now. So until next time, thanks for listening.